And welcome to your Diplomatic Enclave. I'm Yasser Aziz, and today we are honored and humbled to be at Embassy of Ukraine to Islamic Republic of Pakistan. And with me, our guest today is the Honorable Ambassador of Ukraine to Islamic Republic of Pakistan, His Excellency Ambassador Vladimir Ivanovich Lakomov. Today we are going to our interview will be in two parts. We are going to discuss about the current stage of Russian aggression in Ukraine, and also we are going to discuss briefly about Ukraine-Pakistan bilateral relationships. Let me also add that today's interview is sponsored and supported by Pakistan's biggest international news agency, International News Agency. Dear viewers, Henry Kissinger once stated, and I quote, "The West must not forget that to the Russia, Ukraine is not a foreign country. The Russian aggression in Ukraine today is one of the longest and bloodiest conflicts in the Europe that exists and prevails today, with over 10,000 civilian casualties, with over 1.7 million IDPs, internally displaced peoples, with a human violation on daily basis, and also, unfortunately, with no peace in sight." So today we are going to discuss in detail with our guest, the Ambassador of Ukraine to Islamic Republic of Pakistan, about what he thinks and what he views about this Russian aggression. So, Ambassador, thank you so very much for the opportunity, and thank you so very much. And again, welcome to Islamabad, welcome to our motherland.
Good afternoon, Mr. Yasir. Good afternoon, viewers of Diplomatic Enclave. Thank you very much for visiting our embassy and for this opportunity to have a talk about very urgent, very burning questions for Ukraine and all over the world. And speaking on the first block of questions, I must say that Russian aggression to Ukraine, against Ukraine, started in the beginning of 2014, when Ukraine was in a weak point because, you know, it was revolutionary dignity, it was really in a weakened state, and that's why Russian troops, Russian regime, they used this opportunity in a very coward way, and they occupied, annexed Crimean Peninsula, and unleashed a very insidious way, bloody war in eastern part of Ukraine called Donbass. But their plans were crushed, in fact, in full, because their plan was really to overthrow Ukrainian government and maybe to change constitutional regime in Ukraine. And during the 2014, when military activities started, Ukrainian army, Ukrainian volunteers, they resisted aggression. They stopped advancement of Russian troops, especially in Donbass. And since that period, you know, situation came up into existence when, you know, a line of control was established, and due to Minsk Agreement, it's right now one of the hottest areas of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. I must stress once again that, you know, some words which used sometimes in media, in journalism, journalistic reviews, some experts about crisis in Ukraine, civil war in Ukraine, it's purely invented by Russian propaganda, because no civil war in Ukraine right now, no crisis. It could be proved because Ukrainian economy is one of the most dynamic in Europe, despite all the difficulties due to the cardinal reforms realized by Ukrainian government successfully in many areas, due to the help of European Union, our Western partners, first of all, United States of America, Canada, Great Britain, and the rest. European Union, I mentioned. So that's why Ukraine right now, you know, of course, is surviving, not only surviving, but overcoming with difficulties, but successfully, the challenges created by Russia, by Russian aggression, by Russia plans to overthrow, to stop our way on the path of Euro integration.
So, Mr. Ambassador, would you please briefly explain the audience the current stage of this aggression, of this Russian aggression?
You know, right now, this aggression was unleashed in 2014. It's really very insidious, brutal, and bloody aggression, because Russia used both Russian troops, mercenaries, and separatists. But the main backbone of the aggressional forces are Russian professional troops, and we have many proofs, witnesses. I have with myself special material prepared by Ukrainian Ministry of Defense that we have this type of current situation in the anti-terrorist operation. We will speak because right now anti-terrorist operation is changed.
Yes.
Its format is changed into the joint forces operation. So that's very interesting document. It provides, proofs about Russian forces with names, indications of the detachments, their numbers, type of arms used in this, and many of them, of course, prohibited under Minsk Agreement. So Russia is doing very, blatant attack and openly despises all the Minsk Agreement requirements. So these documents could provide all kind of, proofs to my words.
Sure, we will share with our audience.
So you see there is, for instance, that's dislocation of Russian army, armed forces formations. We also have here chronology of the ceasefire violations, because each ceasefire declared, reached in Minsk. In Minsk there is a negotiations between Russia, Ukraine, and when they reach this agreement, immediately, during maybe a couple of hours, they were violated by Russian troops and their mercenaries, their terrorists. So there is, name of Russian military equipment, indications. Most of them, many of them, for instance, are really out of Minsk Agreement list. That's the situation. That's the map. Unfortunately, it's 19 April 2018. So the situation has changed, but still, you could see the geographical description of the crisis. And there are some photos of Russian military equipment in the area. Its equipment belongs to professional, regular Russian troops detachments. For instance, they testing sniper rifle shock. That's the photo taken from the Donetsk area.
These are the Russian forces who
Yes, Russian forces, they are bringing a lot of, modest equipment to test them. So that's why, these photos is proof that they are doing not only like aggression against Ukrainian territory, but also as testing ground for their weapons. That's, reconnaissance about situation in the
Mr.
area. Each case, of the, you must say that, Ukrainians, in our side, many international organization groups, Ukrainian groups, volunteers, they're fixing all these violations. So this war, besides it's cruel and brutal, it's well documented. And the next step after the finishing the war, it will be the Hague Tribunal on International Court against military criminals who unleashed this war from Russian side.
All right. It's interesting that you have, while you were showing us the documents prepared by your military personnel about which is quite an evidence of Russian presence, of Russian troops' presence on the sovereign territory of Ukraine.
Yeah.
So briefly speaking about Minsk Agreement, some researchers, some scholars, they call it as a sad story, Minsk Agreement, this 12 peace plan. So what's your take on that? Is it still intact?
Minsk Agreement, still intact, of course, because no other format exists so far, no better format. You could criticize Minsk Agreement, but it's a backbone of, negotiations. But I must say, about a very important change in the format of operation of Ukrainian armed forces in the eastern Ukraine. Supreme Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine and President Petro Poroshenko signed decree on to change the format of the large-scale anti-terrorist operation introduced in 2014. Right now, it's beginning, he declared beginning of the joint forces operation. Of course, we could discuss about that, but the basic elements of this joint forces operations is that right now the center of command is transferred to armed forces of Ukraine. And General Nayev, he is a chief of joint forces, and all other National Guard, then security service of Ukraine, and the rest of other detachments participating in the anti-terrorist operations, they are subordinate to the commander of joint force operation. We hope that this format will provide easily to liberate our territories from the occupiers, from the occupying forces, to establish peace and restore economy in this area, gravely destroyed by Russian occupation.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Ambassador, I was reading this joint forces operation in details, and when it was launched, of course, it was a good step because it's also accepted and offered by your Defense Council and National Security Committee. So one of the points was there which says like the Ukrainian government wants to bring Crimea back, as well as the other territories which are currently occupied or which are currently under the influence of Russian mercenaries right now. So when we're speaking about Crimea, we see just a few days ago, Mr. Putin has inaugurated this bridge which is connected Russia's mainland to the Crimea. And also, I was in Munich Security Conference, and there was a feeling in that conference that the Russian side is not even willing to speak about Crimea. So how we can expect a negotiation or a peace agreement when the Russians on one side, they're not willing to speak about Crimea, unfortunately, which is a Ukrainian territory, and Ukrainians, of course, they want their territories back. So how would you respond to that?
No, I'd like to start with words of our President Petro Poroshenko. He said, of course, it was an anecdotal story about inauguration of this bridge. You have read maybe in internet lots of funny stories about this, describing Putin attempt to make PR on this. But, Petro Poroshenko said this bridge, of course, in a very soonest time will be used Russians to evacuate their forces from Crimea. That will be very convenient to do it. But you see, I must tell you that military aspects, we were speaking now about change of format is not only way to liberate eastern part of Ukraine and Crimean Peninsula, the territorial autonomous Republic of Crimea. The two other tools, very important in this area, is political and diplomatical ways. And in both ways, Ukraine is very active. Look at the agenda of the recent United Nations decisions, meetings, both in General Assembly, in the committees, in other United Nations organizations. They adopted a lot of documents in support of Ukraine. They provided practically legal basis for further acts from Ukrainian side to sue Russia, because we are considering that occupation is temporary, both Crimea and eastern part of Ukraine. And the mechanism of sanctions, international sanctions, despite all the words from Russian side, they are very efficient. Russian economy is in decline. Living standards there also. So that's why, you could remember the case Soviet Union after Afghanistan war. You could see some analogies, but let's speak about that. We are considering now how we will restore Ukrainian sovereignty in this territory, and first of all, how we will restore economy destroyed by Russians, especially in eastern part of Ukraine. So that's why, these political and diplomatic activities provided good basis in the form of a United Nations document, which could be accepted in any international courts, and they are already doing it. to provide Ukrainians basis to sue Russians for the damage they created, not only in human resources, it could not be restored, but unfortunately, but also they must cover all the damages. And you know, people, economists, experts in this area, they say it's more than 150 billion American dollars. That's minimum.
Speaking briefly about America, about United States, as we know, the United States under the Trump administration, they have acknowledged and approved this $47 million deal, which is going to provide lethal weapon supports to Ukraine, anti-Javelin missile system, which is of course which is going to give good support to your army in order to counter the Russian warfare. So, Mr. Ambassador, as a student of international relations, I would like to ask, does this lethal support or does this this World War situation, so isn't it going to, I mean, how we are going to de-escalate the situation in Ukraine?
No, first of all, you are asking about American support to Ukraine. Of course, we are grateful to American people, American government, President Donald Trump, for providing Ukrainians great support beside and together with our friends and allies, among them European Union, Canada, and many other countries, for their solidarity with struggle of Ukraine against Russian aggression. Of course, we are grateful. Ukraine, you know, is one of the modern and one of the biggest producers of armed equipment, defense equipment in the world. We are providing very good competitive models of armored carriers, tanks, all other type of, you know, arms. So, but what's interesting that this type of equipment, which is used exclusively in defense purposes, could be used against possible potential Russian advancement against Ukraine. And my colleagues, military people, they are of very, very high thought about, you know, javelins, for instance. You meant javelins. They will provide a good support to Ukrainian army. But you must say that Ukrainian army during these 4 years has become one of the strongest in Europe, and the only army in the world who could practically stop and resist the most brutal aggressor in the world. So that's why we are grateful for this help, but we understand that only Ukrainians, only our armed forces could really bring victory to us.
Thank you so very much. In this explanation, we also discussed about European solidarity along with your U.S. partners. So we know in today's Europe is facing the rise of anti-Semitism. There are a lot of crises, anti-migration populist, anti-migration political parties on rise. There is also this rise of populism in Europe. So, Mr. Ambassador, do you think that the internal crisis within the European Union, are they going to somehow divert the attention of your European support towards Ukraine?
No, I don't think. Of course, that's up to experts to discuss crisis or no crisis, anti-migration moods. You know, Europe is still one of the strongest base of democracy and human rights all over the world. That's why I can't agree with you that, you know, they are surviving, they are on the way to some crisis of you know, you could visit Europe, you will see Europe is the strongest as ever. So that's why, you know, I optimist, let's call Euro-optimist, because I know that Europe will overcome all these problems, all these difficulties. Of course, democracy, freedom of thought, freedom of words, it provides, you know, equal opportunity for all, even, you know, ultra-right, ultra-left, nationalistic group. But, you know, in general, European Union and Europe as a civilization, they are healthy enough to overcome these difficulties. And that's why, you know, Ukraine never changed, you know, its Euro-integrational goal to be part of bigger Europe, because, you know, it stems not only from our subjective will, it goes, first of all, from our history. Our civilization was, during the last maybe 500 years, it was a part of Europe. You know, ancient Kiev Rus state, It was a part of Europe that only after, invasion of Mongol Tartar hordes, which never disappeared from that period, from this area, and you know this. When they destroyed this East European state, Kievan Rus, we are going back to our home, let's say. So after, 300 or so years of being part of Russian Empire, Ukraine was, divided into different empires.
But
One was Russian Empire, part, left bank Ukraine or eastern Ukraine. Western part mostly was part of Austro-Hungarian Empire. Crimea was a part of Ottoman Empire. But all the same, Ukraine right now is united nation, united state, united country. And, more or less, but we should say that, this challenge, Russian aggression, first of all, it provided a great impulse for people to be united.
But it's interesting that you are speaking about the Euro-centrism, you are speaking about the Euro integration of Ukraine. But at the same time, some geopolitical strategists and geopolitical analysts as well, they consider or they think Russia as a geostrategic, Ukraine, as a geostrategic reality for the Russia. Of course, Russia, as we know, Ukraine is its main trade hub. For more than 80% of European energy needs, they are being met by the Russian oil and gas. It's also like a buffer state between the NATO and the as we know, the Russian army.
We are not going to be buffer state. That's, a great zone, like some people say. We are going to realize our goal to be a part of European Union and the NATO. Of course, we are realists. We don't see it will be tomorrow, day after tomorrow. But what's important, Ukrainian government, its president, they are united in the idea to move forward in this way and never divert, never come back. Because, our history, it's full of tragedies created both by Russian Empire, Soviet Union. I just could imagine Holodomor, the artificial famine against Ukrainian population, which was unleashed by Bolshevik rulers, purely on the basis that Ukrainian peasants are the carriers of bourgeois ideology, and that's why they must be killed. So that's why, we understand. We survived from many tragedies, including the Second World War. And we know the price of our moving forward to Europe. That's very important.
But does Europe has a plan to tackle Russian Federation under Mr. Putin?
No, right now you could look at the facts, European Union sanctions against Russia are in force, they are valid, and automatically they are prolonged every 6 months. Maybe it will be based on early basis. So that's why, until Putin, that's a very clear policy, until Putin and his regime in Russia would not change the attitude and, first of all, their position on Ukraine, until it will stop all the aggressional acts, activities, supporting terrorists, and, until they will stop and give back Crimean Peninsula to Ukraine, the sanctions will be in force. But these sanctions, I mentioned already, they are really efficient. Despite all the effects they are they're telling about, these effects, but it's propaganda. You could look at statistics, Russian economic indicators, and you will see that's true.
So, lastly, I would like to ask, is peace possible in Ukraine? And if so, what would be your recommendations?
I see in Ukraine we've got a peace, Thanks to God, Ukraine right now is consolidated, more or less, much more consolidated than before. But peace, war is in the area in eastern Donbass. That's really a very brutal and bloodiest war, military conflict. And of course, we are optimists, and we think that two factors are very strong. The strength of our armed forces, because Russia, it's a state which despises international law in open way, and despise, all, let's say, agreements. Until they want something to do, they are trying to do with no stops, no breaks. And, the only force which would keep them out of Ukraine, that's Ukrainian armed forces. And right now, thanks to, consolidated position of our people, our government, they are strong enough to keep them. And we are hope, in the same time, we rely on the help and support of our friends. There are many in the world,
So like a multipolar diplomacy is required?
Yes, that's why we think two factors, another, beside military factor, diplomatic and political factor are very important. And in both ways, Ukraine is moving forward and efficiently acts to protect Ukrainian interests and bring peace in these areas.
All right. Thank you so much. And I would also like to add that Pakistan also maintains a position of neutrality in this regards, and also we want a peaceful solution to this dilemma. And so we will move on to the second part of our interview, sir. So the second part is we will discuss briefly about Pakistan-Ukraine relationship.
No, that's my favorite topic.
Thank you so very much. So, Mr. Ambassador, as we know, since we have developed our diplomatic relationships in the year 1987 with establishing our embassies, of course, we have even historic relationships in terms of Soviet-era times when the engineers under the Soviet bloc, when they came to Pakistan, they helped build our economy, and the example is Pakistan steel mills in Karachi. So 25 years of our diplomatic relationships, where do you see the bilateral relationships? How do you see them today?
No, I see, I will start, of course, with mentioning that, relations and, let's say, friendly links between Pakistan and Ukraine started not only 25 years ago. Of course, we could remember that Ukrainians came here, Ukrainian companies, Ukrainian Z-type state-owned enterprises. They are participated, mostly Ukrainians participated in construction of Karachi steel mills. And some very powerful stations, electric generating facilities in the country. But sometimes we are, I could quote you a very interesting fact. It's only our embassy did it. When I came first to Pakistan, we visited some Pakistani museums, and of course, Pakistan is a very interesting country, but this aspect, I must tell you. We found that, many interesting artifacts belong to Indus Valley civilization, Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, Mehrgarh, and I'm also a big amateur of this, archaeological research. And I remember that in Ukrainian museum we have very similar artifacts. So I remembered both, and when I compared and my colleagues compared, we found that they are practically equal. So it was, of course, discovery, not professional, of course, but visual. And sometimes we are speaking, relations, because this fact was a basis for issuing joint postal stamp, Ukraine-Pakistan. It's a very famous stamp. Right now you could not find it in the shops, but it describes, artifacts from Mohenjo-Daro and Tripilla. And what's interesting, both civilizations were in the same time. So that's why we're speaking that our relations started 5000 BC. Of course, it's joke, but who knows, maybe it's true. And, I must tell that Ukrainian-Pakistani relations, they are traditionally friendly. They started with the fact of establishment diplomatic relations in 1992, and since that period, practically, we have, up moving to new heights. And one of the basic and most important point of the development of relations between Pakistan and Ukraine was conclusion of the famous contracts when Ukrainian defense industry, Ukrainian armed forces, they provided tanks, famous tanks to Pakistan in the very critical time for Pakistan. And since that period, practically military cooperations, defense industry cooperations, they are pivot of our friendship and other links. But I must tell you that during the last years, I'm here 6 years already, I could witness, big upheaval of economic ties, economic relations. Our trade right now at the level of $500 billion American dollars, I mean turnover between both export, import, but we hope easily in 5 years we could reach $1 billion American dollars. Because right now we are doing very intensive, we are providing opportunities for Pakistani and Ukrainian business people to meet each other. And we see that, practically every month, 1, 2, 3 delegation is going from Pakistan to Ukraine, not only to Kyiv. The last case, I remember, people came to Chernihiv Chamber of Commerce and they were very happy to see and to find great opportunities. Of course, they visited Kyiv, central office of the Chamber of Commerce, but nevertheless, their basic destination was Chernihiv, and they found partners, and right now we are expecting big increase in this.
So one of the cornerstones of Ukraine-Pakistan bilateral relationships is our civil military technical collaboration. I remember one of your lawmakers, Wright, at 6th annual Tiger Conference in Kyiv. She said, like, Ukraine's underdeveloped defense industry is held back by ineffective, non-transparent management and excessive secrecy. So my question is, those $600 million deal that you're talking about, that was signed recently during IDEA's 2017.
No, I mentioned about the whole
so is Ukraine,
scope of trade.
Because there is also a concern.
You mentioned about some words of Ukrainian lawmaker.
Yes, Wright. She was Oksana Wright during the conference in Kyiv. I was there, and she said this about this statement. So the point is, the question is, Mr. Ambassador, is Ukraine going to fulfill those requirements under the given circumstances?
Despite all the problems and difficulties facing from Russian aggression, I see there are another impulse provided by this aggression. It's impulse to modernize Ukrainian defense industry. Right now, we increase not only quantity of arms and equipment for the armed forces of Ukraine, but we also modernize, basically, and not only modernize the production lines, whatever, but also we are paying great attention to change, the organization, management of these areas. And one of the facts, Ukrainian company Ukroboronprom, that's the biggest company like Ministry of Defense Production in Pakistan, but it's called Ukroboron, state-owned company or organization, concern. They invited international experts. They created a board of experts. They created a board of foreign, consultants. And right now, this is in the very active phase of changing its structure, its, basic management, introduce the most modern, ideas how to produce it and how to make the production, manufacturing more efficient. And that's why, of course, these people, they could say a lot of criticism. Who will not speak about criticism, because sometimes it's very popular, they think they're there. But the hardest work is to change situation. And what's interesting, in Ukraine, it's really they're doing this. The top managers of Ukroboronprom and the other companies connected with defense industry of Ukraine, they are introducing very intensively these new methods of production. And you could feel it. Ukraine practically right now is increasing not only production for its own internal needs of armed forces of Ukraine, but exports is also increasing. Ukraine is one of the, I guess, 10, even 7 biggest exporters of arms all over the world. And of course, all this criticism, of course, sometimes it could have some, basis, but mostly, my idea, as experienced diplomat, other competitors, what they should do, they're also criticizing the competitors, in our case, Ukraine, that such and such things in a good form, whatever. So, but we are very, very confident in our, defense industry, and right now I must say it's one of the best form ever.
Thank you. And also, I have just finally, I would like to ask quickly about the challenges of our, on the lower level, of course, I'm not talking about the state to state. I'm a student, I'm a graduate of Ukraine universities as well. So we know the mutual recognition of diplomas for the students who come back to Pakistan. It's not accepted. The MOUs, they are still signed, but I believe they're still under observation. So, Mr. Ambassador, may I please ask when we are expecting these treaties to be signed into a final agreement?
You just, hit the point, because my colleague here, she's Madame Yulia, she's my deputy on economic and humanitarian cooperation. Both with her we visited HEC, Higher Education Commission of Pakistan, and we have a very detailed, very principled talk with chief managers of the commission. One of the talk was the question you mentioned about that. And of course, they promised us any kind of facilitation in this way, and we are now in the process of bringing maybe experts from 2 countries to discuss this issue. But I must say that Ukrainian graduates, Pakistani graduates from Ukrainian university, mostly they are very efficient in Pakistan. Because I'm telling, because we've got very efficient, very, let's say, popular association of Pakistani graduates of Ukrainian universities. They held practically every year a big conference, annual conference, and after that they got their festivals. And we could speak with them directly because, we are participating not only discussions, but also in some, cultural events. They remember Ukraine, they are singing Ukrainian songs. Many of them, they got Ukrainian spouses. And, I say many of them, they're efficient people, either in business or in science or in government service, oil and gas industry. Just I remember in my mind 2 brothers there, one of the founders of cardiological science in Pakistan there. They created very popular clinics, cardiological clinics in Mandi Bahauddin. They are authors of the most popular biochemical manual or teaching book for students, not only in Pakistan, but all over the world. I could mention many successful businesses headed by Ukrainian, Pakistani graduates of Ukrainian universities. So we think that, these problems there, of course, are being settled. But, of course, the most urgent now question we are now concentrating, it's medical diplomas for medical universities. That's very important because in Pakistan it's a very tough process, and we study now how to facilitate it.
And one more challenge.
Different schemes could be used, and we will working on it.
One more challenge. Actually, when I was preparing for the interview, I got this question from our Pakistani diaspora back in Ukraine. And their major concern is when Pakistani nationals, they travel with their visas to Ukraine, but the Ukraine airport authorities and the border security management, unfortunately, they deport them back to Pakistan without any proper documentation or any genuine reasons. I don't know for how long this issue is there, but this issue exists, and I will request your comments.
We know about these cases. There are not many, there are few. There are exclusions, there are not rules. Of course, I must tell you in comparison with, visitors to Ukraine from other countries, Pakistani has nothing, to be more prominent than, for instance, your neighbors have the same problems sometimes. It's not only Pakistani, it's a problem of documents, requirements, and here in the embassy, to any visitors to whom we are issuing visa, we explain what procedures should be kept, maintained, and in this case, nothing will happen. nothing will happen. But I must tell you that right now, Ukraine is a part of agreement, association agreement with European Union. One of them, of this agreement is a, visa-free regime of travels of Ukrainian citizens to European Union, and practically general process of our approaching European Union demands from us, strict control on our borders, because we are moving to European Union, maybe in 10 years, I don't know, some period we will be part of full-fledged members of the Union, and that's why, this process is going to be synchronized with European Union. That's why, our borders, they're right now under strict control, and that's not only to Pakistani citizens, but to all over the world. And that's why we explain every visitor to fulfill the rules.
How do you address those issues? For example, if a person gets a genuine visa from your embassy, he travels back to Ukraine.
No, I don't remember the cases, recent cases, I don't remember some of this. But normally in case we are providing visa, we are sure that people will come. And of course, I don't remember some cases, at least during 2 years. It slipped off my mind, maybe. But of course, we consider that, sometimes we are screening the people who are coming to the embassy. And, many applicants, not many, some applicants from Pakistan, we are also providing consular service to Afghanistan citizens. They are seeking, Ukraine as a part of illegal immigration. So that's why, we must screen that, and, we are studying documents, and sometimes we are feeling, documents which do not meet the demands. So that's why, we are bureaucrats, but, that's the requirements all over the world. The same from Pakistan side, Ukrainians come sometimes in case their visa or some documents are not not meeting the requirements of Pakistani. We've got the same problem. That's there are nothing, discriminations or whatever. That's, pure process. By the way, we are on the way of facilitation of travels between two countries. Right now, we are considering, a draft agreement on no visa regime for holders of diplomatic and special passports. Right now, it's in the pipeline of, and we hope it will be signed sooner or later. And also, I say that Pakistani applicants increased, and we are providing all opportunities to Pakistani applicants to be students of Ukrainian university. I mentioned about medical university, polytechnical, agricultural science, and informational technology.
Lastly,
you are also a student, very, very prestigious Ukrainian university and
thank you.
Institute of International Relations, and you are Ukrainian almost, you spent 5 years in Ukraine,
yes,
so you know
6 years, and I consider Ukraine as my second home, actually. Yeah. Lastly, a brief message for Pakistani businessmen as well as visitors who would like to visit and invest in Ukraine, sir.
No, I invite all Pakistani businessmen who are interested in launching joint projects with Ukraine, investment projects, or to try the export into Ukraine, because Ukraine is one of the biggest consumers in Eastern Europe of Pakistani textile, Pakistani kinos. What else? Basmati rice is very popular. 2-3 years ago, you could not find these products. Right now, I remember it was a conference of students of your university, and they say, of course, tanks are very good, but what ordinary person in Kyiv could, who could enjoy from, such a good relations between two countries? Go to the shop, in nearest shop, and look how many Pakistani products there. The guy came and found, basmati rice, Pakistani textile, and kinos.
And those
in a medium shop.
And those who are concerned about the domestic issues like corruption or the documentation procedures, what would be your advice?
Ukraine right now, you are following maybe Ukrainian news, maybe and Ukrainian processes in Ukraine. Right now, anti-corruption campaign is #1 goal of the government. And every day you will see in the pages, in a very frank and sincere and open way, Ukrainian authorities, we have many anti-corruption forces, they are uncovering, some schemes. And I must tell you that this process is serious. It's not, like kind of, mimicry or whatever. That's really serious. Many high officials, they are fired and put under the court. Many schemes stopped, including, all this, which during the previous president, Yanukovych, they were flourishing in many spheres. And that's why you could feel it even on borders. Control, it's stricter, and migration processes. Practically every time, you are open just newsline. In every 10 news, you will find 5 at least about anti-corruption cases. And not only for small policemen or whatever. No, it's high and, media officials of different organizations.
Thank you. So, dear viewers, that's it. So, thank you so very much for joining. So, finally, I would like to comment after today's discussion with the Honorable Ambassador. My conclusion will be, as our Pakistan's official position is Pakistan, we obviously want a peaceful resolution to Ukraine. And we also wish Ukraine the very best of luck in its transformational phase, as the ambassador excluded just a moment ago about its anti-corruption reforms, about its institutional reform, upgrading of its military industry. So we also wish Ukraine the best of luck for its European integration as well as its NATO membership. So, Ambassador, thank you so very much
Thank
for
you very
your
much.
time. Thank you so very much for the opportunity.
It was
sir.
a great pleasure to talk to
Thank
you.
you so
I
very much,
invite
sir.
you once again.
Thank you so much, sir.
I hope you will be in Pakistan in a good position.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Mostly
I also
maybe in the
appreciate your
foreign
time.
service.
Inshallah. Thank you
or
so very much
maybe
for your time, sir.
media.
I
Thank you.
appreciate your time. Thank you.